What can you do with Cinema Yellow Profile that Ricoh released along with the GR4? I set myself the challenge of shooting exclusively with Cinema Yellow for an entire week on a family holiday to Lanzarote to try to make the perfect recipe. All the shots in this video are JPEG straight out of the camera. It seemed obvious that it would be best in sunny conditions, so I started out simple, adding a little saturation and shooting in full sun to make sense of the yellow cast. I set it to auto balance warm. The extra saturation gave it a kind of Kodak gold feeling, but I felt like I could get more from it. I loved how it came out in bright sunlight, as well as in golden hour, and I thought there was something quite striking about overcast conditions, though I didn't need the extra saturation there. I felt it was weakest when it came to sunset, especially as I started pushing the hue away from magenta. Eventually I caved and ended up using the positive film effect with white balance set to color temperature enhancement. I wanted my recipe to pay homage to the beautiful volcanic landscapes of Lanzarote, and I thought the perfect place to refine this would be at the home of local artist César Manrique. He was a painter and sculptor who was influenced by people like Pablo Picasso and Juan Miró, among others. We went to the house where he spent his final years, before taking a road trip up through the mountains to reach the foundation. It's this amazing house he built into the volcanic basalt, full of carved lounges with beautiful pool area. It felt like it might be the best place in the world to relax on a sunny day. In lots of ways it felt like the house itself was Manrique's greatest work, so it was the perfect setting for the Cinema Yellow Profile to shine. After this, I've tried to figure out what makes the recipe perfect. So I'll show you how I set up my recipe. On Cinema Yellow, if you want to push saturation up a little bit, you could push it up to +1. I initially did that because I wanted it to look a bit like Kodak gold or something like that was quite saturated. The problem really is that you get the toning can really contribute to a color cast, and if you push the saturation up even further, it starts to look quite unnatural. So I left it at 0 here. For hue, this is one of the most important things I think for the Cinema Yellow recipe. If you go all the way to -4, you're going to get really cyan skies. +4, you're going to get purpley skies. That's because you're pushing it either towards green on the minus scale or magenta on the plus scale. I pushed it to -1 because I want to bring out a bit of cyan in that sky. I want to push it towards green a little bit like film stocks like Portrait do. If you push it to -2, you can start to get some really funky, almost kind of acid pop colors. You get these really turquoise colors coming out, very kind of candy pinks. It's definitely a mood. I don't know if it's much of an all-rounder, but worth experimenting with that, either -1 or -2, I would say. I've gone high key here, just 1. If you add +1, it gives that slightly overexposed look to the mids, so it raises the mids, and you get a nice bright images, which reminds me a little bit of how film comes out. I haven't changed global contrast. Obviously, if you were to push this all the way down to -4, then you start to get really raised shadows, really lowered highlights. If you go all the way to the other end of the scale, not only are you pushing the contrast in terms of light, but you're actually pushing the contrast in terms of saturation. So you're adding a lot of saturation. I'm going to leave global contrast where it is. I've pulled down the highlights a little bit. I'm already slightly raising the mids using high key. So I just want to make sure I retain some highlight detail, particularly in clouds and in skies. I've lowered the shadow contrast. This is as a kind of all-rounder recipe. So I'm basically bringing back a little bit of the shadow detail, but not as much as the highlights. So things are more likely to fall to shadow than they are to get blown out. What you can do if it's a really bright day and you want those blacks to be really crushed is flick it to +1 or +2. And then you'll start to get those really dark shadows, which contrast really nicely with the detail that you find that's illuminated by sunlight. As an all-rounder recipe, I'm going to leave this at -1. Leaving sharpness where it is because I really like how sharp this lens is. Toning is one I've kind of played around with a bit. I would say there's basically no reason to use +3 on toning. It's just too strong. It gives too much of a sickly yellowish color cast. Many of the photos I shot for this video were set to 2 on toning. I didn't want to move it too much because I felt like I wanted to find a recipe that was true to the spirit of the image control. That said, I think if you flick it to +1, you get much more naturalistic tones and it's less obvious which image control you're going for. So you might want to use +1 as a 1 on toning as a base here. I think if you want it to look different from other things, then you should stay true to the spirit and leave it on +2. I'm not doing any shading, which is basically vignetting. I'm going to leave the clarity where it is. If you add too much clarity, it starts to look really kind of digitally enhanced. If you take a lot away, it can start to be a bit more dreamy looking. So if you're looking for a kind of dreamy look, you might want to reduce the clarity by 1 or 2. Grain effect, I realize, is slightly controversial for digital grain. I have actually had it on here, and one thing I noticed was that if you set the size and the intensity to 1, it's a really nice, well-controlled set of grain. I don't really think if you start adding size, it's not too noticeable. What becomes very noticeable is when you add intensity to the grain. So I would be very sparing with my use of grain. I have it on for this recipe, but it's just 1 and 1. So I hope that was really useful for you. I've loved trying to play with cinema yellow to get the perfect recipe. And I think next time I go on holiday, I'm going to be using it a lot. Subscribe if you want to see more of this kind of thing, and I'll see you in the next one.